Hey there. Welcome back to the Spread Nesson's football and sports betting picks podcast. I'm Nesson.com's Mike Cole, joined once again, and as always, by Ricky Doyle, also of Nesson.com fame. Ricky, you are on location this week. Do you want to get into that off the top before we get into part one of our NFL preview spectacular?
I can't think of a better place to start, right? I mean, we speak pretty frequently about our vehicular issues, and I had a little bit of one driving home last night from the office, so hence why I am remote today. Basically, my car almost lit on fire, so managed to avoid total disaster, but for the time being, for the next few days, I feel like I'm probably going to be off the grid here, it's tough. I had a nice little weekend planned up in Maine, so now I am seeking alternative transportation for that. So it's really throwing a wrench into my day, but we press on here. That's for damn sure.
I could use a few extra bucks if you want me to be your own Uber service. I'll drive you up. Then
dude, it might come to that. This is so I was driving and I saw that the temperature gauge just slowly creeping up.
That's not good.
And in my the dashboard of my Jeep has been lighting up like a Christmas tree for the better part of 6 months anyway. So I'm maybe it's just another notch on its belt or whatever. And then as I started to really get towards the highway, I'm like, ooh, is that smoke? And it kind of smelled a little funny, and I'm just like, this is not good. So pulled into the gas station, dealt with that for a little bit. And by dealt with that, I mean I opened the hood and just looked at a bunch of crap.
Let me throw some gas on this thing. See if that fixes
I went in and bought a big bottle of water. Not exactly sure what that was going to do. I threw some coolant in there, and then I tried to make it home, and I had to pull over halfway home again because it was doing it again. And whatever. Here I am though. Made it.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than when you stop. Because you think it could be one thing and you end up spending money on trying to fix the problem, and it's not that at all. I know this is a recurring bit, but I've been going through that with our swimming pool. It's I'm just buying copious amounts of chemicals to put in the pool when it's actually it's something completely different. It's I just wasted $200 on this and that.
Honestly, you know what pissed me off the most about the whole thing was so when it first started, and it started heating up. Yeah, in order to kill some time, I got I got dinner somewhere. I forgot to mention that. I went and got some food because I'm this will kill a half hour, knowing that I have leftovers in the fridge that I was dying to get home to. So
exactly.
There's an extra expense I had to tack on. So it was just everything was piling up. Just not good. But I mean, this is what I get for driving that thing into the ground, right? You know my car. I mean, this thing's got 122,000 miles on it. It's a 2010. So I always said as long as it gets me from point A to point B. But now I'm point A to point B is becoming very complicated. I'm stopping at C, D, E, and F before I get to D.
At the very least, it's becoming very short. Point A to point B. Is that the same Jeep that you've had as long as I've known you?
Entire time I've been in Nesson, yeah.
That's insane.
13,
which I guess is
now.
Great run on that. No, I think there's some full circle stuff there in terms of discussions that we've had in the past about our vehicles, and really the past year. Somewhat related, tying up a loose end, or not quite tying it up. It's August now, and my car is due for inspection, and I have still not yet fixed my side view mirror. So to really bring everything, we were talking about this stuff last October. You had issues with your horns going off. Things are overheating. I don't have a side view mirror, and here we are, 10 months later.
I still don't have a horn, by the way. That's
right.
The other
we
thing.
Haven't fixed anything.
If things really devolved on the highway last night, and I had to get over a few lanes or something, if the horn came into play, I was totally porked. But
we gotta get. I was gonna try to negotiate a raise or two for us on air right now to kind of we gotta upgrade our rides, I think, by the sounds of it. So I guess we'll do that next week.
But hopefully this goes seamless. But I will mention before we get into it is my neighbor apparently has a drum set. Didn't know that until about 25 minutes ago. So if you had a little drummer boy and poke his head in here, that's him. So midway through, you'll either hear it or I'll take off and go strangle him for a few minutes.
All right, yeah. Well, you and I met yesterday to go over the rundown. We were like, this week we're not gonna do any patty cake at the top. Let's get right into it. But that was before your car almost burned down in the middle of a tunnel somewhere. So I'm glad we got to that. Like we said, this week we're starting basically a 3-week run up to the NFL season. Maybe a 4-week run up. You won't be involved in the last one. I've got a potential surprise I'm cooking up for that week. I have reached out to a potential co-host for the penultimate week of the summer. I guess it's the last week of the summer before the season starts. A very familiar face to this very program.
I might have a guess or two, but no spoilers.
Yeah. So we'll see. But yeah, we're kind of rolling down summer here, running it down, getting in the NFL season. We're going to kind of I think this week we're going to talk mostly about quarterbacks. It's something we've kind of been teasing for what feels like a month now. Next 2 weeks, we'll kind of get it in the conferences and try to do it in a creative way, not just running through everything. So before we get into like what this is technically, I guess, our quarterback edition, we were going to kind of touch on, you and I talked real quick yesterday, what's going to happen with Brandon Ayuk and how we're going to attack that depending on what happens. I'm following my guy, Pretty Ricky, who is a Twitter account or X account, excuse me, of let me see. I'm pulling up his. He's got a hilarious. He's like a dog, or he's got a dog avatar on Twitter, and he's been scooping stuff all summer, and he's been saying for about a week and a half, or a few days at least, that Brandon Ayuk is going to end up in Pittsburgh, and it felt like that was on life support with the Patriots and the Browns circling. Now it sounds like Pittsburgh might be the most likely destination. As we get into kind of this conversation about quarterbacks, we get into talking about this upcoming season. Does this move the needle for you at all? If he ends up in Pittsburgh, does that change any of your calculations, your preseason models? What do we think of just the Brandon Ayuk thing? Because that'll probably break as soon as we get out of here. So we're kind of trying to play that sensitively, but I think it's worth touching on it real quick.
Yeah, I mean it's especially noteworthy for us being the Nesson when covering the Patriots extensively. I mean, we've been kind of hitting this from all angles, what it meant for the Patriots and, things of that nature, which I mean, to start there, like this is your new reality if you're the Patriots, right? It's like you can beg players to come more or less, give them top of market value because it seems like they had an offer out there reportedly for what, like $30 million a year. So
allegedly, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like it speaks to, you're just not really a destination anymore. So at some point, the Patriots, I feel like it's inevitable that maybe this happens next offseason or the offseason after that. Like they're going to give out some head scratching big money deal on free agency, and it might be panned because it might be a player who probably doesn't even deserve that much money. Not saying that's Ayuk, but it'll be a necessary evil because they just got to get people back in that building in terms of the open market. But
they've already been trying like hell to do it. I mean, if you want to go back to the offseason with Calvin Ridley, they tried to do that too. So, yeah. I mean, this is what bad teams do is they end up signing big name free agents or skill position players to massive amounts of money and hope that helps the quarterback situation as they go along. So,
but yeah, as far as we kicked this around yesterday, like whether you look at Brandon Ayuk props and like whether his potential landing spot impacts how you view him as a player, I think I'd be more apt to look at the fallout rather than Ayuk himself, like the potential impact on the offense he joins, or kind of like you alluded to, like what does that mean for whatever team he joins? Like if he joins Pittsburgh, their make playoff odds now according to DraftKings is plus 185. Plus 320 to be a wild card seed. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, I would maybe mess around with, even if you think Cincinnati and Baltimore are sort of the class of the AFC North, maybe you like Ayuk enough that it changes your opinion of Cleveland and Pittsburgh to where if you don't want to bet them to make the playoffs, maybe you look at like an exact order divisional bet or something. Like, maybe like Pittsburgh overtakes Cleveland in the 3 spot in the AFC North. Like, you could get super nuanced with it. Because I do think he's a game-changing talent wherever he lands, especially with either of those teams, Pittsburgh and Cleveland, who we know what they're able to do defensively. And it's really a matter of what they're able to do offensively. And obviously, he's such a dynamic threat, helps you in the passing game, running game, outside, inside, very versatile. We've kind of went over this a few weeks ago, but So wherever he goes, my opinion of that team changes.
In Pretty Ricky, I trust. I think he's going to end up in Pittsburgh. And if that's the case, if I were to make one bet today, but related or even tangentially related to this, FanDuel's got George Pickens, regular season receiving yards, over-under set at 925.5. I would just kind of blindly go under because there's more mouths to feed, or he's going to be, maybe he's involved in the trade and he ends up in San Francisco. I don't know if that's even on the table, but like either way, the target share goes down for him. I think that's kind of where I would look as opposed to all of the interesting ideas that you kind of threw out there. I guess we kind of talked about this a couple weeks ago. Like, I don't know if Brandon Ayuk is, lead the league in receiving yards no matter where he's playing. Obviously, that's never going to happen in San Francisco, but even if he ends up in Pittsburgh, I'm not sure. Either he splits it with Calvin Pickens or, he ends up catching balls from Russell Wilson, who is potentially dilapidated as an asset. So, there's those question marks all over the place. So he is kind of a hard one. Again, it's just he's such a interesting. I don't want to call him complimentary because he's not going to get paid like a complimentary player, but his skill set feels pretty complimentary, at least in what we've seen on tape from him to this point in his career.
Yeah, I mean the other side of that coin is looking at what it means for the San Francisco offense. Maybe that's another way you attack it. It's like, all right, I'm not going to really focus on Brandon Ayuk props, but I am going to take a look at what that means for Deebo Samuel. Or maybe you feel a little worse about Brock Purdy if you're hurting his supporting cast. Although it sounds like they may bring in a wide receiver to replace him, whether it's Amari Cooper or whatever. But yeah, that's just another way to look at it. It's maybe just take a flyer on the San Francisco offense regressing a little bit and what that means for their props.
Also, Christian McCaffrey's dealing with, I think it's a calf injury too, so that kind of complicates the matter too. That's
Christian McCaffrey, am I right?
Yeah, you nailed it. That's again, by the time we get done talking, something will change, so we don't want to get too deep into it. Plus, as we talked about, this is a quarterback league, quarterback show. That being said, as we kind of transition into that, the NFL 100 came out over the week. I know there's been plenty of talk about this on other shows in the Nesson Vodcast Network, but Tyreek Hill, number one. I don't know what our takeaways here are as we kind of use this as a springboard into a quarterback discussion. I do think it tells you that this is mostly, what is this? Is this all player voted, the NFL 100? It is, right?
I think so.
So, I mean, these guys, I don't want to say they don't know anything about what they're talking about because they're professional football players and they should know about other professional football players. I think this is political more than anything else, so I'm not reading too much into the fact that Tyreek Hill, a wide receiver, ends up number one on this list. I just think it's like you start digging into it. It's absolutely ridiculous that Patrick Mahomes is not number one and just it's everybody else. The fact that he's not even the top quarterback tells you that this is probably more about who guys have had as teammates, who they like, who their friends are, who they went to college with. I think there's a lot more that kind of goes into it before you get into actually who's the best player in the league. Tyreek Hill is a splendid player. It's just I think there's probably 5 or 6 guys I would take before him, and they're probably all quarterbacks, or at least most of them are.
Yeah, I mean, I picture like guys getting this sheet of paper as they're walking around in a towel. Like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, like I gotta go get my smoothie.
Yeah, like you gotta vote for the best players in the league, and they're like, all right, whatever. Put a bunch of teammates, maybe mix in like Tyreek Hill or something.
The other thing is like 85-yard touchdown last week. He's the best.
I was just gonna say like this is probably a lot of guys who've like gotten toasted by Tyreek Hill too. So like that's the other thing. It's like Patrick Mahomes is. I think everybody's clear number one, but it's like with him, sure they're the unique plays or whatever, but at the same time, there's a lot of like death by 1,000 cuts to his game. Whereas like Tyreek Hill, you have plenty of guys across the league who've been left like sucking wind on the sideline because of him. So it's like that scene in Superbad. You're like, he's the fastest guy alive. He's the fastest guy alive. So like, there's probably plenty of guys coming in the locker room like, yeah, that Tyreek Hill's the fastest guy alive, and I'm just gonna throw him at the top of my list for the sake of being different. I don't know, mixing in a non-teammate.
Is there any world in which you would rather pay $30 million for a receiver than pay $60 million for a quarterback? Like, all things being equal. Yeah, so like at the end of the day, I think it doesn't. I have this kind of written in my notes. Like, is there any world in which wide receivers are more valuable than quarterbacks on the whole? I don't think we're ever going to get to that point. I mean, maybe like if you wanted to get super galaxy brain, if this league turns into what if the libs get their hands on it and turns into touch football, their flag football, maybe the receivers and skill position players become a little more valuable. But yeah, I sat there, stared at this question for a couple minutes, and I'm like, can I make a case for this? I was like, no, I cannot make a case for this, which is why I think the Tyreek Hill thing is ridiculous. But
yeah,
understandable.
I wanted to I want to play devil's advocate and be like, what's the argument in favor of Tyreek Hill? Like, what's the world that we could live in where it is Tyreek Hill? And you kind of touched on it, right? Like it's if you're playing it's like backyard football or something. Yeah. You're playing one game and you're just looking at pure skill, athleticism, speed. Just give me the fastest, most talented guy I can find, and you're like, yeah, he jumps off the page. So I guess that's the argument, and I guess that would also be the argument to have Lamar Jackson as the top quarterback over Patrick Mahomes, him coming in at number 2 on the list.
I was just gonna say, kind of related to that, the way that the quarterback position is evolving or has evolved over the last decade, 2 decades. Those athletic guys, the ones that you're talking about, a lot of them are quarterbacks too at this point. So it kind of devalues the super athletic receiver to some extent, or at least puts more value on the quarterback when you have guys like that, especially ones who can throw. And I think that's the biggest thing with Lamar Jackson is we've seen the evolution of him as a passer. I don't think there's any world in which I can get to him being the top quarterback in the entire NFL over Patrick Mahomes, at least not yet. But I can work. He keeps improving to the point where I guess maybe I can consider it, but that's a slightly different conversation. I guess that does kind of tie into the idea of, how do you rank quarterbacks? I think I don't think there's a right answer. So it's more just a curiosity. I'm curious to what you look at. What's your rubric? What's the curriculum look like?
So I've thought about this, and I think I've settled on there being 3 main factors.
Oh, okay.
1, do you make everyone around you better?
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious, right? Sure, there's some instances where there's you can make a chicken and egg argument when you get guys thriving in systems with, elite weapons around them or whatever. But I think by and large, you kind of know when you see it. These are the quarterbacks whose play is sensational when everything's in place. And then when everything's not in place, they're maybe not quite as sensational, but they're still performing at an elite level. The red flag goes up when someone's performance falls off a cliff because of injuries or whatever. So I'm looking at guys who just, no matter what, they're going to be good. That's the bare minimum. It's kind of like being a manager versus being a high-performing employee, right? When you're these guys, it's your job is to go out there and make sure that the entire thing doesn't go to crap. Regardless of what you look like in the process. So that's number 1. Number 2, do you win at a consistently high level? And I mean, that's the object of the game, right?
Yeah.
As the quarterback, you have the ability to influence that outcome more than any other player on the field. And I'm not even talking about Super Bowls. People forget winning Super Bowls pretty damn hard. Only one team does it a year. I just need you to be consistently good though. In the conversation, playoffs, whatever. And then 3, I don't want to completely disregard numbers. I think quarterbacks, more so than most positions in sports, can probably be boiled down to the eye test. When you see good quarterback play and bad quarterback play.
Yeah.
But I do think there is some, I think it offers a little extra validity when you're okay, that guy's pretty good. Let me check the numbers. Oh, no, he is really good. Because then maybe that sort of helps you assess the surrounding environment, whether there's another gear for a young quarterback. So those are the 3 things. Yeah, guys are running better, win at a high level, numbers support the eye test.
You took the eye test thing right out of my mouth, where it's I guess, or maybe I would have added that as an element is I think the eye test would be part of it. And that's, I think, the one spot where morons like you and I are going to inevitably fall short. So I guess another way of putting that, or at least looking at it, is can you make every throw on a somewhat consistent basis? It basically boils down to, can you do everything as a top flight NFL quarterback on a relatively consistent basis? And I think that's the one that, well, I guess they're all kind of dependent on situations around them, and that's what I think makes this difficult. Make this conversation so difficult, convoluted, nuanced. Is there's so many factors, more so than ever at any point in the history of the sport that go into this discussion where, we just got done talking about Tua Tagovailoa and Jordan Love last week, and talking about like, who's got what coach, what's around him. The Tyreek Hill, we just got done talking about him. Like that factors into, a quarterback who gets to throw to him is going to, you want to talk about numbers, he's going to put up better numbers probably because he's got a great receiver. He's got a great system. So that's where it gets difficult, obviously, right? Is like trying to parse through that and be like, what is this? How much of this is this guy? How much of it's the system? Do you hurt a guy's reputation or standing as the top quarterback because his system is better? But it's like there's value, there's inherent value in that. You talk about high performing teams. That's part of it. I don't think. As a quick side note, I don't think people who taught us that sort of stuff expected us to use it tangibly in a discussion about quarterbacks on our stupid little podcast.
It is though. I mean, you're managing the offense. You gotta get to the end zone.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like I never know how to react to talking about like a game manager or that type of moniker for guys who maybe don't have all of those throws in their skill set, at least not as consistently, but can you make more with what's around you? I think you kind of boil it down to 3 super critical points and super critical criteria. It's just like there's so much other stuff that is hard to quantify that goes into this, which is why I think you look at, we talked about, we've looked at the NFL 100 list. We looked at the ESPN list. You look at the Madden ratings. Like there's so many different ways to cut this, and break down this debate. So it's difficult. I also think there's a little bit of it where, the whole thing about porn is like, when you see it, like I think similarly, I think a franchise quarterback when you see it. So I guess that's just another way of saying eye test. It's convoluted. I know I feel like I rambled there for a minute, but like I totally agree with everything you said, but applying that is easier said than done.
Yeah. Well, one other thing I'll add to is I love when not just quarterbacks, players, athletes in general, like reinvent themselves. 100%. Or just adapt to like they adjust their approach or whatever it may be, but like they recognize their environment, their situation, and they change their game in order to maximize their longevity or just the overall performance of the team. Like that's why I look at a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who
exactly
very clearly is. I mean, the talent is obvious. Like we've seen that since the second he stepped foot in the league. But like really what separates him over the past few years is, I mean, you had the year where you had Tyreek Hill and, and that offense was just humming every single week. They won. Then you get to last season, or you want to go back 2 seasons where like started to incorporate the running backs in the passing game a little bit more because you realized that was the way that he had to, operate that offense. And then go into last year where it was kind of a slog, realize you got to lean on the defense and not force things that aren't there. So like, he's just constantly reinventing himself as the Chiefs have constantly reinvented themselves. So I put a lot of stock into that. And then like one other thing is just like the ultimate question for me when it comes to this conversation is like, what is the drop off if you remove that quarterback from the equation? Like, Patrick Mahomes, you remove him from the equation. What are the Chiefs? Like,
yeah,
who the hell knows?
Yeah. It's
6-7. Like,
it's a little bit. It's like an amorphous thing, right? And that was the thing with Brady for years, too, is you go back to the start of Brady's career. He was a quote-unquote game manager. Then he gets Randy Moss, and he gets those weapons, and they're putting up 50 a game. And I know they didn't win the Super Bowl that year, but I think there was still part of that, like, super offense, even after Moss had left, that was when they got back to winning Super Bowls. And then toward the end of his career, game to game, he was so locked in and could make every throw, but also could recognize what was in front of him and adapt to that, and that went a huge way too. So yeah, I think there's a whole lot of ways to break it down. I think we did a pretty good job of kind of hitting every single base, so we can't sit here and say we missed one or we're not totally locked in. Let's get into.
Who knew we had such thoughts on the philosophy of quarterback play? You should team up for a book.
Now you're talking.
On managing offenses.
How to become a high-performing offense. I don't know. It's like be the quarterback of life, or
Yeah.
be the quarterback for your organization. All right, you want to do some drafting, some rankings? How do you want to do this? We're going to draft the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. I still don't know what our parameters are here. Are we doing this just for this year? Are we doing it for just for one game? Are we doing it for 5 years? Are we doing it for 5 games? What do you want to do?
All right. Here's what we'll do. So you mentioned there's plenty of rankings out there. So like this is, I guess, our just way of coming at rankings from a different angle. We'll do a draft. We'll switch off. No contracts.
No contracts.
I don't want to get into then you start to factor that stuff in. Yeah,
these guys can all buy a new Jeep. That's all we know.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't have time to be splitting hairs about these guys' bank accounts. All right, should we? Here's my question for you. Do you want to project beyond 2024? You just want to do just one season, 2024 season?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, season preview show. Sure.
So this is drafting guys for just this year.
Yeah. Yeah, you're the road team. You're battling the adversity. I will give you the first pick.
Oh, what a gentleman!
I know.
I mean, I gotta go Mahomes, right? So Patrick Mahomes. You know how Mahomes is the guy aside from the 3 Super Bowls rings.
There's a compelling amount of evidence, but go ahead.
But like, not even the nerds can formulate an argument against him. Like you read some of these like rankings or like you do. Even if you go to like try to really go under the hood or look at websites that skew very, very analytically heavy, even they're just like, well, it's Patrick Mahomes, so like we'll put that there and then we'll kind of move on.
Pro Football Focus did their rankings for all 32 starters before the season. I don't know when they published this. Let's see here. I could probably find this easily. May. They published this in May. They have tier number 1 is just Mahomes. Mahomes is ranked number 1. 2023 wasn't his best year by the numbers, but after back-to-back Super Bowls with one of his least talented supporting cast, we're not even going to entertain overthinking this one. Like that pretty much, that's that.
Yeah.
So my flaw was giving you the number 1 pick because I do think as soon as you get to number 2, the conversation gets muddy and it starts talking about like the factors that we hit on already. I have no idea where I want to go here. I think I'm going to go with Lamar Jackson, though. I think the growth that we kind of talked about earlier as a passer, given the fact that he's got game-changing athletic ability where it's a play is never dead with him. Like he is – we saw this at, 2 or 3, 4, 5, however many years ago with Mahomes where he was really, elusive between injuries and age and things like that. He doesn't necessarily have that anymore. Lamar still does. So even on a game where he isn't throwing the ball as well as, maybe you'd like him to throw it, he can still tuck it and run. Again, I don't have to deal with the injury thing as much because we're only doing this for 1 year. So I like him and just hope that he can make the throws. That kind of comes and goes. There are issues, if you want to call it that, with his big game performances, but I'll just take the statistical evidence points to this guy being super, super solid for 17 straight weeks. So
he's like kind of the guy I had in mind when I talked about like winning at a consistently high level, not necessarily it being Super Bowls. Because his regular season winning percentage is like Tom Brady-esque. You know what I mean? Like, and once you get into the playoffs, like that's when some other factors start to creep in, and that's when you see like the whole some of the parts, come about. And like, I mean, goes a guy we'll probably talk about here at some point, Josh Allen, like what he did in that playoff game against the Chiefs last year. It's like, how do you blame him for defensive shortcomings, whatever? So like that's when the other variables become involved. But I think I'm with you on Lamar for being 2. I was thinking about this, like, I don't want to call him underrated because, like, I don't know how you be a 2-time MVP and you're underrated. I think everybody acknowledges how good he is, but, like, I'm looking at, like, the MVP odds and him sitting there at 15-1 behind Mahomes.
We had this conversation, like, a month ago. It's the same exact thing. It's just...
Like, but he's behind C.J. Stroud at 10-1, Jordan Love 14-1, Joe Burrow 10. Like, this guy's won MVPs, multiple MVPs, and he's sitting at 15-1. Like, I don't know. No, I don't want to give anything away, but I might be looking towards that when we do our AFC preview. All right, number 3, I'm going to go this is where the conversation gets tricky again. I'm going Joe Burrow, though. I think the injuries last year kind of make us forget just how elite he is.
Is he elite? No.
I think he's elite.
Am I playing? I think I might just be overdoing it with devil's advocate, where it's just like, I don't know. I get, yeah. I mean, they went to the Super Bowl like 2 or 3 years ago. All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, he's deadly accurate, and there's obviously the clutch factor. Like, he's never been bad.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're any doubts you have about him related to the injuries, right? Like, you count on one hand probably the number of bad games he's had since he's been in the NFL. So I think this year he's set up to. I think he might be number 2 by the time next year rolls around. But yeah, it's this 2 to 4 window is tricky because I think there's a clear trio of guys. But I'm giving Burrow the slight nod here.
Again, gets tricky here. I guess in hindsight, yeah, I would probably do, even though my natural inclination was to push back there, I guess I would probably do the same thing because of what happens after that. I guess I have to take Josh Allen here. I don't love it because if I'm projecting ahead, honestly, I think, as a spoiler alert for next week with our AFC preview, if that's what we're doing, like, I don't know, Buffalo, I feel like is maybe not missed their window, but it's closed a lot faster than maybe we kind of expected or they would have hoped. I look at Josh Allen, I just think he's imperfect. Maybe, I don't know. Are we taking him for granted at this point in his career? The numbers, to your point, are more or less through the roof. I think he, more so than a lot of the guys on whatever comes of this list, have been done dirty, for lack of a better term, by their supporting cast. Like, you look at what they have up there, it's like, I don't know. Like, they've gone through offensive coordinators, but I am looking at, I was looking at the ESPN.com. They did their top 10 ranking of quarterbacks, was talking to players, execs, something like whatever it was. One AFC exec said he leaves you wanting more a little bit. I was like, I kind of get that, even though I can't totally articulate why. I thought this was an even more interesting observation from the actual whoever wrote the story, saying Allen is a Luka Doncic level volume scorer, and I was like, hell yeah! Like, that makes all the sense in the world. Like, the numbers are going to be there, but it's just, can he do it on his own? Does he need help? The talent is undeniable. I think in the same way that Lamar has evolved over the course of his career, you look at what Josh Allen was early in his career, and he's been MVP level since then. The day ball factor is there too. I don't know how much of it was, the system. This is where it gets dicey trying to make these evaluations. So I would go Josh Allen here at 4, but I don't love it. But it also feels too early to kind of start diving into the guys that we're projecting who are going to make big steps this year. So I'll go Josh Allen at 4 and be like, well, I guess this is what I am. So what do you got? Let's go ahead.
I love the Luka Doncic comparison.
Yeah.
Because, like, both guys are, like you said, the volume is there. Nobody is doubting that, like, they're the talent level. In their case, the ability to make guys on their team better. But each one has a fatal flaw, right? Like,
yeah.
For Luka, it's on the defensive end. For Josh Allen, it's the turnovers. And, like,
the decision making.
Those things are ultimately what could prevent you from you reaching your ceiling and your team reaching that ceiling. And I think I have that concern about Allen more so than the 3 ahead of him.
And they're both, like, Luka and Allen are guys, like, I'd buy tickets to go watch them play, but I don't know if I'd feel great about trying to win a Super Bowl if they're, my guy. So, but he's the talent is too much to turn up. So he actually had somebody gave him a number 1 ranking in this ESPN thing. So interesting. What's your who's your number? What's up at number 5? I guess your third pick.
So there's the clear 4, right? Like, that's tier 1.
Yeah, I think so.
And then after that, this is where the parameters of this exercise come into play. If it's like, I know we're doing for this season, but this is where if you started factoring in, like, hey, projecting 5 years, 10 years, whatever down the road. All right, number 5. I'm going to go with Dak Prescott.
That would have been my pick too, I think. Yeah.
I look back at those. Was it C.J. Stroud that recently had his quarterback rankings? He kind of took a lot of flack for it on whatever podcast he was on, and he included Dak. And I feel like a lot of people push back on that aspect of his rankings. The bigger issue for me was him including himself and Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
Like, the Dak thing didn't even really register. I'm like, yeah, sure. Even if you don't think he's a top 5, I think you can very easily make the argument. So, I mean, with Dak, obviously, it's the inability to finish in the big game once he gets to the playoffs. But, like, I don't know, man. 2 of the last 3 seasons were elite. And when you start to look at the next collection of guys that we're working our way into here, every one of these guys has holes or flaws or has fallen on their face or whatever. So, I think that Dak is just – I think he's better than people give him credit for.
Yeah, that's probably who I would go with there too. Now it's a 6. I guess I'm gonna go Justin Herbert. It came down to it's like Justin Herbert, Matthew Stafford, that neighborhood where it's. I guess you're gonna feel good about having any one of them, but are you gonna feel great? And I still think it's probably a little too early to start throwing C.J. Stroud up the list. Jordan Love, even Hurts. Like there's just question marks everywhere you look. So I guess I'll take Herbert here because I think any of his shortcomings are probably he's victim of his situation more so than anyone else. Like you look at the rash of injuries that they've had, you look at the just a calamity that's been that coaching staff over the course of his career. I think I can look ahead to next year and be like, he's going to be number 3 on these lists or whatever, largely because like Jim Harbaugh just completely raised the floor and it allowed him to kind of chase his ceiling a little more effectively. So I would take Herbert here. Just because I'm more or less projecting that he's going to look more like his actual self of what the eye test tells me he should be when he's got a better system and just a more efficient foundation around him. So,
I considered Herbert at one point for 5, and then the more I thought of it, I'm like, Dak Prescott is Justin Herbert. He's just done it longer.
Yeah,
more or less from like a production standpoint. Like I think this is again like goes back to the parameters because. As you said, Herbert could make a huge leap up these rankings, but from what we've seen so far, like there just hasn't really been that natural progression that everybody had hoped. Hasn't won a playoff game yet. Like, I don't know. We'll see with him. Whereas Dak, like, yeah, he has his flaws, but he's just performed at a consistently high level for a pretty long time now.
Do you want to just? We're gonna go into. I think we're gonna do 10, but we're taking up way too much time as usual. One thing that you did mention that I want to touch on real quick is talking about the worst quarterbacks in the league, because I think if you're going to talk about the best, you got to talk about the worst. If you were to pick the worst guy, who's the last guy on this list for you, I guess, of projected starters?
Oh, boy.
Do you have anybody in this grouping, at least? Who's in the poop tier?
Across the entire league, you're saying?
Yeah, I guess. Starters, yeah.
It's tricky because I don't want to. I'm going to rule out any rookie starters. One, because I don't know if they're actually going to start the season as a starter, and 2, I just don't know what the hell they're going to be. So, like, I don't know. I'm looking at like whoever starts with the Raiders is going to blow.
Yeah, it's like Aiden O'Connell
or Gardner Minshew. Like they're both going to stink. So I would start there.
I eliminated those guys, like the ones that don't have a clear defined starter. I was like, well, classic. If you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one, right? Like. It's just a disaster. Can I sell you on one?
Sure.
Russell Wilson, maybe. At least much closer to the bottom of the barrel than the top. He had some big-time throws last year based on like that Pro Football Focus metric that would tell you that it might have been system and just the complete dumpster fire that was Pittsburgh's offense at times last year. I just think there's way too much. He's taken such a massive step backwards, and that was happening before he got to Pittsburgh. The Denver thing was obviously a disaster. Seattle, it wasn't even great at the end there. I think he's just on a very slippery slope to the bottom, and I think Justin Fields is going to be starting before too long in Pittsburgh, because at least I think they get to the point where like we got to see if Fields has any chance of being our guy from this year and beyond. And like I wonder how the Ayuk thing does affect that as well. It's just, I think that Pittsburgh situation is one worth watching, and I do think Russell Wilson, we could be looking at the end of the year being like, man, that guy is just, we're at the end. Like, we're already at the end. So I was just trying to have a hot take more than anything there, but that's...
Fields, Ayuk, Pickens, I can I can get on board with that.
Yeah, I don't know if Fields is accurate enough, but
yeah, I like Fields. I don't know.
I do too. Yeah. Now that he's not in Chicago, at least, like it was just a mess. Like Daniel Jones is a guy who's near the bottom in a lot of these. I actually, think he's low key not good but decent. This is gonna not age well for me at all. Where it's like high on Daniel Jones, low on Russell Wilson. But I'm curious to see what he can do. And I'm also, I'm interested to see what Will Levis does in Tennessee. I think those are the kind of guys that are going to be toward the bottom of every list. So that's kind of how I break it down there.
What about
Russell
Bryce
Wilson
Young?
is like running out of chances. What's that?
Bryce Young.
It's still too early for me to be like, this guy's the worst quarterback. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the small quarterbacks for me that I always like. Yeah, I don't know. Size is
that's
there.
True.
It like throws me off.
Yeah, he could be out of the league in like 3 years.
Yeah.
All right, before we get out of here, no, that was actually he's on the list. I just think if he sucks, he won't start for long. He's not very good. He's great in a spell, but not a sustained quarterback. CBSSports.com had a story a couple weeks ago, about including one of the bylines is our friend Ben Fox, who used to work at VSiN, is a close, dear friend of the program, despite never having been on. But him and Josh Nagel wrote for CBS Sports, ranking the most valuable NFL quarterbacks against the spread. The elite tier was Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, and Jordan Love. Part of that is like kind of looking at a quarterback situation and judging it against kind of what you were talking about earlier, judging against like their backup. If you take this guy away, how screwed is the team? I guess that's another way of putting it. The porked metrics, if you want to call it that. Not a whole lot to argue with here. I do think it's super interesting though that you take Patrick Mahomes away and that's 7 points. I mean, that's Brady territory from prime Patriots. I know Sam Panayotovich kind of wrote similar stories over the years for us. I don't know. Do you have any general thoughts on quarterback?
Which is interesting because one year I believe he one of the stories he wrote talked about what Russell Wilson was worth against the spread. Like I think he was the most valuable quarterback against the spread maybe in his first year in Denver.
Yeah.
Because of what you talked about, like
the drop off.
Yeah. One, it was you were getting Russell Wilson at a point where like his stock was up, like he was still considered old Russell Wilson, and two, the backup situation was like Brett Rippon or something. It was somebody so bad that the discrepancy between the two quarterbacks made it so that value against the spread was as high as it was. But that also, I would look at it as like a cautionary tale that like maybe I'm not going to put too much stock into. Like I'm more focused on the starter, the player themselves when it comes to the value, not so much the difference between him and the backup. Because I think if you're that good, you're going to be that much better than anyone, right? Like it doesn't matter who the hell Patrick Mahomes' backup is. He's going to be so much better than whoever it is anyways.
Yeah, that's where it gets a little when you start talking
simple
about
way of looking at it, but
yeah, I mean it's like, well, then what did we just spend the last 45 minutes doing? We kind of talked about this, just shooting ideas around. Is there a quarterback that you maybe are irrationally afraid to bet against? Like, I pulled this up, ATS. Like Lamar Jackson, according to this one story at betmgm.com, 12-1 against the spread as an underdog for his career. That like I was kind of trying to find is there a guy that you're just like every time he's on the other end of my bet I end up losing because I've got a
I mean that feels like a good easy philosophy right there, right? Like don't bet against an elite quarterback when they're catching points. Like that was the whole thing.
Right.
Mahomes towards the end of last year when the Chiefs started going on their run. It's like, wait a second here. Like, I mean, the Mahomes factor totally skewed how I viewed that Super Bowl. Like everything pointed to the Niners, but it was like, well, do I really want to bet against Patrick Mahomes here? So I think just by and large, like betting against that top tier of quarterbacks is like something that for the most part, I don't have any interest in doing.
I guess the other thing too, I'm just kind of scrolling through this. One number that jumps off the page: Kenny Pickett 8-3-0 against the spread as an underdog. Like, I guess it kind of to tie the whole thing together is Kenny Pickett good? No. Can he be halfway serviceable when a team is on the wrong side of the market and like you look at the rest of that team and it's a good head coach, good defense, at least at various points of his career in Pittsburgh, like that. but like I don't think I've ever. I irrationally think like betting against Kirk Cousins has come back to bite me in the ass, but he's been pretty decent, at least not on Monday night. Yeah, it's just some interesting data to pour over
For
as
me,
we
it's
prepare.
the irrational fear, I guess, is like betting against the quarterbacks whose floor and ceiling are so wide, because like I'm thinking of Kyler Murray. You know,
It's a
like
perfect example, right?
Kyler Murray is a guy that he could suck. He could not even maybe finish the game. But then there are other games where they're Arizona's trailing by 24, and the next thing you know, they're sneaking in the backfield for a cover like that.
Or they're getting to the over because
example.
he breaks off an 85-yard touchdown, and all of a sudden your under
100%.
is dead because and actually the numbers kind of backed it up. He's 9-15 in his career against the spread as a favorite, 25-14-2 with a 63% cover rate as an underdog. So that's something that I'm filing that away. I'm actually high on Arizona this year.
That applies to fantasy too. Like I feel like he's the guy when like you have a 60-point lead in the 4:00 window in fantasy, and all of a sudden, like you check your phone when you're at the supermarket a few hours later, and you're like, "What the hell happened?" And it's because Kyler Murray had like 150 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns.
We're getting increasingly close to those just major heartbreaks as the NFL season approaches. You'll be stuck in that parking lot because your Jeep will be broken, and you'll have to just sit there watching it on your phone as you eat your Tostitos or whatever. So
maybe I should get that bike we talked about last week.
Now we're talking
like that process.
Hell yeah, bike to Maine. All right, so that's it for this week's edition of the Spread. Our quarterback bonanza. We'll be back again next week, assuming Ricky can bike his way back from Maine. If not, we'll have to do this remotely again. But any parting shots from you, Ricky?
No, I'm going to go under the hood.
I'm just glad you didn't die in a major inferno on the side of 93. So congratulations. All right, cool. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back again next week to do it all over. This is The Spread. See you next week.